sports fans, sports collectors, and all hobbyists. Welcome to the Card King Sports and Variety Show. I am your host, the Catman, Brian Cataquet, a.k.a. the Card King. We are live on ABC's KMET 1490 AM.com, your number one spot right here for news and talk on the West Coast. I thank everyone for tuning in this morning. On the telephone line, I welcome to the program former pro baseball pitcher who played for the Indians, Reds, Cardinals, Astros, Dodgers, and the Philadelphia Phillies. He's hard-throwing right-hander George Culver. George, Brian C., thanks so much for your time this morning.
Well, thank you, Brian. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate that hard-throwing comment there.
It's really my pleasure. And, you know, George, for many years I've collected a lot of your vintage baseball cards produced through the years, so really a thrill for me to have you on. Let's begin, George. May 9th, 1963, 20-year-old George Culver signs as an amateur free agent for the New York Yankees. How did the Yankees hear about you?
Well, my college coach, Jerry Collis, who was a former he played in the Yankee organization, and he had a good friend, but was a scout for the Yankees. And so he recommended me to the gentleman, and so the guy, after my sophomore year, he came around, watched me throw a couple of times, and signed me to a contract. It wasn't a whole lot of money, $2,500, but in those days that was a lot of money to me. I'll tell you, I was tickled to death to get it.
Yeah, and, you know, and then winter that same year, 63, Cleveland selects you from the Yankees in the first year minor league draft. Now, were you surprised that the Cleveland selected you, or did you think you were going to stay with the New York Yankees?
Well, you know, in those days, the Yankees were the one team on TV every year because they played in the World Series every year, and so that was all my idols were Yankee guys, Mickey Mantle and Yogi Berra and all those guys. They were all my idols because that's all you ever saw on television was the Yankees. And so I was pitching in Miami against the I think it was Phillies farm club, and they had a pitcher by the name of Ferguson Jenkins pitching against me, and I got beat 1-0 in Miami. And after the game at Cleveland, a guy named Monchi D'Arcos came in the locker room and said, "You're going to be an Indian next year." And this is like in July. I said, "How do you know that?" He said, "We're going to take you in a draft." I didn't know anything about it. First-year player draft. There was no major league draft in those days. It was all free agents. So I didn't think much about it, except I kept it in the back of my mind. And sure enough, in December, when they had the winter meetings, Cleveland took me in what they called first-year player draft. They don't have that anymore. But what the idea was that after 1 year, you had to protect everybody on a certain roster, or they could be drafted up to a next roster. And in that case, Yankees put me on a AAA roster, and so Cleveland had to put me on a major league roster. So my entire career, I was in a major league camp every year because I was on the major league roster. So the spring training was always in a major league camp, which was quite a thrill.
Yeah, quite a thrill. And then 1966. Looking at your record statistics, you make your major league debut against the Red Sox, and you face Jose Tartabull. Do you remember that game very well?
I remember parts of it. I remember how nervous I was. One thing that helped was I got to pitch a little bit in spring training that year, even though I didn't make the club, and so I kind of had a feel for facing major league hitters. And I also had pitched an exhibition game the year before that against the Pirates, and they were loaded. They had Clemente and Smokey Burgess and a bunch of guys like that. And so in '64, I pitched against them in an exhibition game in Cleveland. So I wasn't totally in awe. And just so happened that I pitched okay, but they took me out with a couple guys on base, and my best buddy came in and served up a 3-run homer, I think. And so I got tagged for some more runs, but I actually didn't pitch that bad. But that was my only start. They brought me up, and that was my only start. The rest of the time, I pitched the entire time in the bullpen, and then I never got a chance to start for the Indians again, except one more time in '67 when Joe Adcock was the manager. So I was a reliever from then on. Not what I wanted to do.
Wow. And then, but I tell you, that 66 Cleveland Indians staff, I mean, not only did it have George Culver, yourself, but also Sam McDowell, a young Louis Tiant. Those two pitchers, McDowell and Tiant, how did you get along with them?
Well, Sam was great. He was when I first came up to spring training in '64. He took me under his wing and kind of showed me around, helped me a lot, and we stayed in the same. Him and his wife and me and my wife. We stayed in the same apartment complex, and so had a nice relationship with Sam. And then Louis was everybody's friend was Louis. I mean, he's the funniest guy I ever played with. He every day in the locker room was a complete ride. It was like a comedy show every day. He had so many. He was just a fun guy to be around, and so yeah, great relationship with both those guys.
And how about Del Crandall? I know he was one of the catchers on the team. Did he catch most of your pitching performances?
No, actually, Del was brought over to catch Sam McDowell's game. That's why he was there, to catch Sam McDowell, and they thought that would help Sam when Del was there. But I don't think Del was there in '66 when I came up. I think he came up in '67. But the catch were Duke Sims.
Askew, right? Joe Askew?
Joe Askew, Jose Askew, yeah, and Duke Sims and
Buddy Booker.
Guys. Buddy Booker, yeah. Buddy Booker was a AAA. He was in AAA with me, and he came to the big leagues also, yeah. So Cleveland had some good players. I mean, they had good players. They just, for some reason, they just couldn't put it all together.
And one thing about actually the scouting report on you is that I mean, you were a workhorse. I mean, there were years that you pitched. I mean, your managers were not afraid to use you out there. I mean, you were a workhorse. I mean, how did you build up a stamina to pitch all those games? I mean, you pitched multiple years with over 50 games a season.
Well, when I came up to Cleveland in '66, I started one game, and then the rest of them I was just a reliever, which I didn't like. I wanted to start, and so when the season started in '67, Joe Adcock was the manager, and he wanted me in the bullpen. Well, I had not even pitched that much in the bullpen in the minor leagues, so this was all kind of new to me, and I was kind of almost the closer of all things. And so that year, I think I pitched in 53 games, which set a rookie record for Cleveland, appearances. And then, so when I got traded to the Reds, then Dave Bristol was the manager, and he gave me a chance to start again. So I don't know, in '68 with the Reds, I started 35 games and relieved in 7 others. Okay, you couldn't even do that now. You get fired. If you're the manager, you get fired doing that now. But nobody would start 35 games and relieve 7 other games. But we just didn't have a lot of pitchers, and we had 10-man pitching staff, and 2 or 3 of them were hurt all the time, and they didn't have the 13-man rosters like they do now for pitchers. And so we just had to volunteer to pitch. Myself, Jack Fisher, in particular, anybody want to pitch? Yeah, we'll pitch. And hurt my arm. It definitely hurt my arm and shortened my career. But when you're there, you try to do whatever you can to stay there. I mean, I told him, hell, I'll clean the locker room. What does it take to stay here? I want to stay here. So, and then luckily for me, my arm bounced back good. I could recover quickly. I could warm up fast, and so that made it pretty easy for the managers to use me in relief.
Yeah, I mean, there was a year. I don't know if it was '67. You made like 50. You actually led the Cleveland staff with like 53 appearances that year, and you mentioned Cincinnati acquired your contract from Cleveland in '68, and now how was it playing for Cincinnati?
I loved it. I loved the Cincinnati was a total different atmosphere from Cleveland. I mean, the Cincinnati fans were totally into the game. Cleveland, we played in that place they called the Mistake by the Lake, that stadium in Cleveland, and I loved it because it was the big leagues, but there was no atmosphere. There was no, we'd average, 15,000 people a game at best. And you go to Cincinnati, I mean, they got a ruckus crowd every night, and everybody was behind you. You walk down the street, and people would recognize you. And I love playing for Cincinnati. I love playing for Dave Bristol. And so it was a completely different atmosphere, and we had a potential championship team. That was the beginning of the Big Red Machine. Johnny Bench, Pete Rose, Tony Perez, Tommy Helm. That was the beginning of the Big Red Machine. And so, unfortunately, I got traded before that team actually got to the World Series, but it was a real pleasure to play for the Reds.
Yeah, and again, when Cincinnati acquired you from Cleveland, they acquired you as a relief pitcher. However, George, you quickly demonstrated very well that July 29th, 1968 game against the Phillies, which is a remarkable when the Phillies, you pitched the no hitter, which you're very well known for.
Well, yeah, and see, Dave Bristol had managed the San Diego Padres in 1964 when I was with the Portland Beavers, and so he had seen me pitch as a starter. And so when I got to Cincinnati, he said, "You're not a reliever anymore. You're a starter. You're going to start for us." And so, and again, what happened was we had Jim Maloney, we had Mel Pappas, we had some guys that were really good major league pitchers, and they were hurt. And so they needed somebody to start, so they threw me in a starter's role, although I didn't start out the season as a starter, but I was kind of the long man spot starter. Well, I ended up being in the regular rotation, and like I said, I started 35 games. That's a lot, and pitched a lot of innings, and it took its toll on me.
We're talking with George Culver, who pitched the famous no-hitter for the Cincinnati Reds on July 29th, 1968. That game, George, what if you could go back, what did you do differently that morning?
Well, it was the second game of doubleheader for one thing, and so we first game was at 6 o'clock. It was in Philly, and so if you're starting the second game of doubleheader like that, you don't have to go out the ballpark with the team bus. So I stayed behind, caught a cab out about 7:30 or whatever, and I got there and everyone was like in the fourth inning. So I sat around. So I had tried to eat, and I didn't feel very good. For some reason, my stomach wasn't feeling all that good, so I was kind of eating junk food and whatever. Well, anyway, so finally the game starts it was a big, long, one of them 19 to 18 games or whatever, the first game. Big, long game, drawn out. So I think we started the second game like 10:30 at night. And
wow.
So I went down to warm up, and I had a problem with my big toe. Lee May had stepped on my toe in winter ball that year, and I had been fighting an ingrown toenail, and that finally just got to the point where I couldn't even hardly put a shoe on. So I went upstairs with a trainer, and he shot me full of Novocaine, and so I went back down to warm up. But when I got back down to warm up, the umpires were out already. I hadn't even thrown a pitch to warm up. And so I hurried up whatever I could, get as many warm-ups as I could. In those days, I don't know if you remember this or not, but in those days they had a lot of the warm-up mounds right in front of the dugouts, so the fans could watch the starting pitcher warm up. And so I got my catcher and fired fast as I could throw it, maybe 15 pitches at the most. And the game started, and all I could think about was kind of ease in, don't hurt your arm. Take it easy, don't hurt your arm, try to overthrow. So I kind of breezed through the first couple innings and got loose. And so, I don't know, just good Lord said, this is your day, don't screw it up. So I got lucky.
Yeah, I mean, and the Phillies, they had Dick Allen, Johnny Callison, Bill White, all who couldn't hit you that day. I mean, you were on your game. There's no question about that.
Yeah, Johnny Callison was from my hometown in Bakersfield, and I had watched him play. He was older than me. He graduated about 4 years before I did, but I had seen him play football, basketball, and baseball in high school. He was an unbelievable athlete, unbelievable. And so it was a thrill to be able to face him and then, be able to survive without him getting hit off me. I kept thinking, he's going to mess it up. I know he's going to mess it up, and I kept getting him out. And so, like I said, very fortunate. Anytime you pitch a no-hitter, it involves a lot of luck, and so I was blessed.
And George, who caught you no-hitter? Was it Johnny Bench?
No, Bench caught the first game because, like I said, first game doubleheader. Bench caught the first game, and it was a real long game. And so Pat Corrales, who was a good buddy of mine, was from this area, from Fresno. He caught the game, and we had a good relationship. And he actually is one of my favorite catchers I ever threw to. And so the Reds gave me a $1,000 bonus at the end of the game, or $1,000 bonus. And I gave Pat half of it. So he had a family, and I did. I was single. He had a family and some kids, so I gave him half the money to help him out with his family. So he was a good friend. He just passed away recently, by the way. It was a sad loss.
Wow. And then, like other players on that Red team, like you mentioned, Pete Rose. How was playing with Pete Rose? I mean, what a player! He was so aggressive on in the field. He could do it all, Pete Rose.
Well, he was a bundle of energy every day. When he walked in the locker room, I mean, he lit up the locker room. You knew that, Pete Rose was in town, and he played his rear end off every single day, and gave you everything he had. And it was just, you just wonder how that guy could have that much energy every single day, walk and run to first base, hustle, hustle, hustle. And he was a good example for any young players. And so I still see Pete. He does autographs over in Las Vegas. I don't know if you know that or not. He signs autographs at the MGM and also Caesar's Palace occasionally. And so if you ever go to Vegas, he's in one of those little side stores and signs autographs. I still see him, and still we have a good little conversation, talk about old times. So love Pete to death.
Yeah, I did see a video of him signing autographs recently, and he looks so skinny and fragile. I really hope Pete Rose is okay.
Well, last time I saw him, he wasn't skinny and fragile. He looked very healthy,
Yeah.
and looked happy. And I think he lives in Vegas now, and so he's as far as I know, he's doing fine. I'm going to go see him in October. Towards the end of October, I'm going over there for a youth baseball tournament, and I'll stop in and say hello to him.
Well, and how about like other players on that Cincinnati team, like Vada Pinson, the great Vada Pinson, Tony Perez. I mean, and even Johnny Bench. I mean, Johnny Bench was a young Johnny Bench. How were those teammates?
Bench came along with a big reputation, and when I got traded to Cincinnati, I'd heard all about him. I said, "There's no way anybody can be that good. Come on." They were just ranting and raving about it. And so when I got over and was playing with him, I said, you know what? He's better than that. He's better than what they were saying. That's how good he was. I mean, he was a great catcher. He could throw. He could hit. He could hit for power. And he was smart behind the plate. I mean, for a young kid, he knew how to call a game, and a good relationship. And we lived in the same apartment in Cincinnati and spent a lot of time together. Tony Perez, one of the greatest teammates you'd ever want. He gave everything he had every day, and there's no secret why those two are in the Hall of Fame. Vada Pinson, great teammate. Vada Pinson he looked, every time we get on a road trip, get off the plane, he looked like he just got out of the shower. I mean, he's the cleanest guy I've ever been around my life. He never had clothes never had a wrinkle in him. And never drank, never touched alcohol or anything. So in spring training, he had a Cadillac, and so some of us we'd hit a couple of clubs in Tampa. Hey, Veda, can we use your car? Sure. He goes to his car, and we go out and run around his car. So he was a great team. And Tommy Helms was a great player, underrated player, second baseman. We got traded to Houston together, and he had a really good major league career, and him and I lived together in the same apartment in Cincinnati, and Bench lived there also, not in our apartment, but he had his own apartment, and so I miss a lot of those guys. So that was some great teammates.
Yeah, no question. How about Jim Maloney? Jim Maloney was on the team also, right?
Yeah, him and Pat Corrales were actually on the same high school team in Fresno.
Oh, is that right?
And so Maloney he was sort of maybe a little bit on the downswing a little bit of his career, but he could still throw the heck out of the ball. And he actually, late in his career, learned how to throw a grease ball. He watched Gaylord Perry pitch one day, and he greased up with some Vaseline and started throwing grease balls. And he added another couple of years to his career throwing grease balls. So I still in touch with Jim occasionally, and I think the last time I heard, he was doing a drug and rehabilitation thing for players and Sam McDowell was doing the same thing. So it's great of Jim to do something like that.
Yeah. So then after the Reds, you go to St. Louis Cardinals, and then to the Houston Astros that same 1970 season, right?
Yeah, I started. I don't know. I was with the Cardinals, and I had a bad arm. I'd hurt my arm opening day warming up, my arm started bothering me over there. I don't know what caused it, but anyway. So I struggled through the first couple of months. I actually got off to a good start. I won my first 3 games, but my elbow just kept getting worse and worse. And the team doctor in St. Louis told me I had tendonitis in my elbow. So he said, just keep throwing through it. It'll be all right. Well, it never got any better. So I set out about 10 days without pitching, give me some rest, and they traded me to Houston. So I get to Houston, and the guy said, when's the last time you pitched? I told him, I don't know, like 10 days ago. How come? I said, well, I got a bad arm. You got a bad arm? They trade you to us, and you with a bad arm? I guess, yeah. So I go to the Houston doctor. Guess what? I had bone chips in my elbow. And the St. Louis Cardinals never said anything about it. So I spent the entire year, 1970, fighting that arm issue, and then at the end of the season I had surgery. I made it through the whole season. In severe pain. I mean, as bad a pain as you want to have with an elbow. And at the end of the season, I had the surgery, but I was never the same after that. There was nowhere near the same after that. But I ended up pitching, 3 or 4 more years, but was not the same.
Well, that's what I mean. I mean, like I said, you were considered really a workhorse. I mean, with the Reds, I read an article that you were the busiest pitcher of the season. I mean, you pitched like 226 innings, and you led the Red staff again in innings pitched. So again, your managers were not shy of showcasing your talent out there.
No, like I said, we had a bunch of guys that were injury prone, and so. Sometimes we'd be down. We started spring training, if you can believe this, with 7 healthy pitchers, 7. And we only had a 10-man staff, so 3 guys were hurt, and they didn't use the disabled list the way they do now. And so I just had to volunteer to pitch, and so every time they need a pitcher, I'd say, okay, I'll go. Come on, I'll go. I ended up pitching in San Diego one day. I can document all this stuff. I pitched in first game of doubleheader in San Diego. I'm gonna say I pitched, 6, maybe 7 innings. And second game doubleheader, we ran out of pitchers, and I pitched in that game too. But you'd never ever do that again. You'd get fired on the spot if you're the manager or a pitching coach or whatever. But that's what we had to do. I wanted to keep my job, and so I was not concerned about my record. I was concerned about getting in them games and keeping my job.
Yeah, and you sure moved around because you with with the Astros from 70 to 72, and then 73 you're with the Dodgers, 70 also that year with the Philadelphia Phillies, 73, 74. So then the Dodgers acquire you, and then you go to Philadelphia that same year, 73.
Yeah, I don't know what the deal was there. We were in first place in 73 by I don't know, by 5, 6, 7 games in August. And Walt Olson called me in. I was doing a good job for him. I was like I wasn't their closer, but I was one of their middle guys, long man in the bullpen for him. And Walt Olson calls me in. He said, got bad news. I said, what's that? He said, we trade you to Philly. And I go, oh, no, for what? He said, well, that's Mr. Campanis. Oh, my God, there I go again. I just so happy with the Dodgers. They had so many great teammates, Charlie Huff, Al Downing, Steve Yeager, Billy Russell, good friends, and all of a sudden you're gone again. It's like changing schools in the middle of the year, when you're a kid. And so anyway, I went to the Phillies, and then I was there for parts of 2 seasons. And Paul Owens, who was the general manager of the Phillies, he knew me. He was the scout in Bakersfield when I was a high school kid and college kid, and so he knew me very well. And he was a big reason they got me. From the Dodgers. So luckily I kept the job. I kept another job for a couple of years, and then finally in 74 I ended up signing with Japan in 74. I started out with the Phillies in their AAA team, and then Japan came over and asked if I wanted to go to Japan. I said, heck yeah, I'll do anything. I'll do anything to stay in baseball. So anyway, that was fun.
Yeah, and those 73 Phillies, you had a young Mike Schmidt. Steve Carlton was on the roster as well. How were those playing with those 2 players? A young Schmidt and Steve Carlton. Bob
Boone, Larry Boa, Greg Luzinski.
Forget it.
They had Jim Lomber. They had it was just almost like the beginning of the Big Red Machine all over again. And then once they got Pete Rose, that turned the corner for him. But Mike was a great buddy. Steve Carlton, I played with him in St. Louis, so we were still good buddies from St. Louis. And, I mean, the team was right on the verge of being great, and that's what they ended up being a great team for 3 or 4 years after that. But I kept missing out by 1 year, Brian. I kept missing out by 1 year these World Series teams, and so I played with and against 50 Hall of Famers. You know, the Cardinals had Bob Gibson, Joe Torre, Lou Brock. There's 3 Hall of Famers right there, and every team I was on, I was fortunate to be around those guys and hopefully learn from those guys and see what it's like. Admire those guys, and I always tell young kids when you go to the big leagues, you can admire them, but don't fall in love with them. You still got to face them. You know, it's okay to admire them, but don't fall in love with them where you can't compete against them. And so that was a mistake I made when I first came up. I mean, I'm pitching against Mickey Mantle, and oh my God, Mickey Mantle, I'm scared to death. You know, and you just have to forget about that and just wipe that name off of their back and just pitch to the guy with the name on the front. And so.
And how about Hank Aaron, Willie Mays?
Oh, McCovey, Mays, Clemente.
Oh, forget it.
Yastrzemski. Willie and I were actually pretty good buddies. We come to town, we go play golf together. So, I mean, he'd be laughing at me.
And I have like 30 seconds left, George. But, I just found this interesting. Jim Lawnberg was also on your team with Philadelphia, and you faced him on your Major League Baseball debut, right, against the Red Sox.
Correct. Yes, that's correct, yeah. And, Brian, I want to mention one thing. You guys do the collecting stuff, right?
Yes.
Every year, this is phenomenal. I always tell them, I don't know how this happens. Every year, I average about 400 autograph requests a year. I haven't played in 50 years. Every day, I get these requests for autographs with self-addressed stamped envelope, and I'm just shocked at how many people still find baseball cards of me.
Well, I mean, your name is cemented amongst millions of collectors out there, so it's good to know. I mean, you're still a fan favorite. I really appreciate your time, George. I wish we had more, but time's running short.
Hey, call back anytime, Brian. I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity to be on your show.
My pleasure. Take care of yourself.
Okay, bye-bye.
George Culver. Until next week, happy collecting to all.